you want to hold the winning hand, you need to become. The more you stand to lose. So go ahead.
Cyberpunk 2077 truly had one of the more interesting development cycles the world has ever seen. The game, which was announced in 2013, didn't come out till the end of 2020 and came out to such an abysmal state that it was pulled off the PlayStation Store. Truly unheard of shenanigans. That's not to say that it wasn't given its due when it came to public outrage. Combined with the collective anger of the pandemic, you would have thought CD Projekt Red had just killed every gamer's mom. But then with some better business practices and then a little existential waifu culture literally rezzing them from the dead, CD Projekt Red was able to get the game back on its feet and stick its landing, which is where we are today with the release of its first and only DLC, Phantom Liberty. And finally, it feels like Cyberpunk 2077 is getting its due. It's reviewing extremely well, and its word-of-mouth praise is filling the internet with genuine interest for the second time. But if you were following that game back in 2018, you know that the real reason that people felt like the base game was like watching their friend get shot in the back was because it wasn't what CD Projekt Red had promised us that the game would be. So, what was that game? And what is Cyberpunk 2077 now? Are they the same game? And does Cyberpunk 2077 finally live up to the hype? In my opinion, Cyberpunk 2077 is kinda like a Kojima game in the sense that you kinda have to know what it was like during its development cycle. And an important part of this Shakespearean play of a development cycle was when the game was first revealed. God, I know someone is pissed that I almost just called Cyberpunk 2077 like a Kojima game. This story begins in 2013. Higher than a kite in a different galaxy, CD Projekt Red was suffering from the success of The Witcher 3 and decided to announce, much too early, their newest IP, Cyberpunk 2077, based off of the tabletop game. The announcement was a CGI trailer that had people buzzing. But first, they had to rightfully close the chapter of their life that was The Witcher 3, so they kept quiet about that game for a while and released some pretty good DLCs for The Witcher 3. But all throughout that time, people were itching for a new strain of CD Projekt Red, and they were asking, where's Cyberpunk? And CD Projekt Red kept saying, hey, we're cooking, don't worry about it. But then, in 2018, 5 years after the reveal, CD Projekt Red reveals to us that they were, in fact, cooking. Kind of. A 48-minute gameplay reveal was dropped that featured a slightly different version of the game's opening missions. It was mind-blowing. Everyone lost their minds about how in-depth this game seemed. Holy shit, futuristic bullet time! Destructible buildings and walls, guns with trackable bullets, drone hacking, sex. And while its gun mechanics wowed many people and showed that they could fulfill their dreams of being
Badass motherfuckers.
the trailer's true motivation was to show us two things. The first being the game's setting, Night City, and the second was that the game allowed you to be an agent of change in the world, and you could make game and story-shattering decisions like no other game had let you before. The character customization was incredibly dense. Style is everything in Night City was a prominent slogan used throughout its marketing for its entire cycle. This led us to believe that outfit customization was going to be insane, and that we could dress ourselves better than any Barbie, directed by Greta Gerwig. A dense amount of cyberware that could create dozens of builds, and then combat interactions that could be solved in genuinely different ways. None of that smoke and mirrors stuff. Anyone with half an imagination was already dreaming of who they wanted their character to be. It was a genius bit of marketing because, one, it told us that even though CD Projekt Red was basically only known for making third-person fantasy RPGs, they had the sauce to make an in-depth first-person shooter that could make Bethesda even pee their pants a little. And two, that this was a role-playing experience that would genuinely make you feel like you are somebody in Night City and that you mattered. And not just because the game told you that you did, but because you genuinely had the freedom to change the world as you see fit. And that was CD Projekt Red's greatest promise. But then it became their greatest betrayal. The next part most of you know well, and I don't like to beat a dead horse, so I'll just say that when it came to the game's final release, 7 years after the reveal trailer was dropped, the game wasn't just disappointing, it was unplayable. If you truly don't know what it was like, there are dozens of videos where you can watch the state of the game upon release. I highly encourage Susie's video on it, it's an incredible video. But honestly, fully props to CD Projekt Red because they refused to sit on their L and began what might be one of the greatest comeback stories for a video game ever. They started by announcing an original anime set in Night City being done by Studio Trigger. At the same time, they decided to work behind the scenes on fixing the game. Still maybe using questionable developmental cycle choices, but ones that would eventually truly fix the game. Dropping these updates concurrently with the anime, the game became an overnight hit with public consensus changing completely. With Lucy on the Moon and finally a game worth playing, CD Projekt Red knew that it was time to stick the landing with their first and only DLC, Phantom Liberty. So I had my first true Cyberpunk 2077 playthrough, like most people, when the anime dropped. At the time, the game was fixed, but honestly, it still played like a 2018 game in 2022. Really solid, but a little behind. Now, with the 2.0 update and the DLC, the game is truly an RPG for the history books. The combat updates are incredible. My biggest issue with the combat, even with the 2022 update, was the melee combat. Doing a melee build was almost impossible due to how broken that system was. Now, I think I see most people running some sort of melee build. Using these weapons in conjunction with the wide variety of new skills and cyberware makes this game insanely fun to play through. I ran a katana build with a Sandevistan, rest in peace David, and man, when I tell you I felt like Nightcrawler zipping throughout an arena in slow-mo, oh, it was so much fun. And to speak on its updated cyberware and skills, man, it is shocking how much better it is than the old ones. Why the fuck was this not the original plan? It creates a more equal linear progression system, and you really do feel like you're getting stronger with each level. I also want to note that my Phantom Liberty run was specifically played on hard to see if the game had good difficulty scaling, instead of just beefing enemies with health. And to my surprise, it had genuinely good difficulty scaling. Enemies are certainly more beefy in early levels, but what's really nice is that health doesn't scale as much as damage does in this game. So eventually, when you get better weapons and better skills, you kill enemies as quickly as they kill you, which allows for incredibly more fun strategies than just running around a damage sponge. On the bug side of things, the game still has bugs, but now it's not as bad, so when you do come across a bug, it's a little more charming than annoying. Oh, and that slogan of "style is everything in Night City," that's finally come true as they've stripped clothing of its armor and now is just purely cosmetic. It's still mind-blowing that they tried to run that slogan and then decided to make a system where you can't dress however you want due to armor. But now, my V looks absolutely sick as hell, and I feel a little bit better about how I'm presenting myself in these cutscenes. Overall, the gameplay has been perfected, and to CD Projekt Red's credit, some of their design choices will become the new standard in first-person shooter RPGs to come. But as much as CD Projekt Red is known for making good games, they're also known for writing good stories, and honestly, Cyberpunk 2077 has always had an amazing story. People might not have been happy with the endings of the original, but the story and all of the endings are brutal. And it follows the themes that Mike Pondsmith wrote so many years ago.
Cyberpunk isn't about saving humanity, it's about saving yourself.
The story has always been about that, and the way that it executed it, even from 1.0, was beautiful. And honestly, Phantom Liberty is CD Projekt Red's writers at the top of their game. The DLC is set in the self-contained district of Night City called Dogtown. It is there that you have to save the president of the new United States, while also being led to believe that the people you are helping have a solution to V's relic problem. And while the base game has this heist gameplay loop, it's extremely refreshing to go on these spy missions in this futuristic world. I'm not kidding, this is probably the best Mission Impossible game we could possibly get. The choices you make in the story are even heavier than the base game, and when you get to the end of it, you feel uneasy no matter the choice, just like a good story would. And that new ending? Dude, I finished the game, turned off my computer, and sat in the shower for like 45 minutes. I loved it. Also, I'm a really big fan of voice acting, and I love giving shoutouts to great performances. I mean, of course, Idris Elba is terrifying. I mean, he is an incredible actor. There's no denying that. But it's also really nice because in his performance, you kind of get to hear that he really enjoyed being a part of this project. Also, something really cool is that they make his model so much bigger than you are. And it's not really something that you would notice until you start thinking about it. To close out the big money casting, Keanu Reeves also gives a good performance. A giant shout out to both Gavin Drea and Jeremy Lee as V. Both of them kill it in that performance. I personally played as female V, and as someone who's just played Persona 5, it is absolutely nuts how much range Jeremy Lee has. But honestly, the real standout performance here was by Minji Chang as Songbird. She just crafts this performance that's like so incredibly deep and dude. Dude. Fuck, it's just such a good performance. You cling to every word she says, and she ropes you from the second she's on screen. It's almost fucked up how good performance that is. But overall, the entire cast of this game is amazing, and it really adds to the world. And that is truly the greatest gift this game gives. Night City is a fantasy world to be remembered. I'm so glad that I got to live in this city and explore its areas and meet its people. It's a fully fleshed out and beautiful world, and it's definitely one of my favorite video game settings of all time. The game at this point in time is truly a marvel and an absolute must play. If you were on the fence or even had a tiny inkling in your soul to purchase this game, please do it. It's worth every cent, which I cannot believe is a common consensus of the game, but I'm glad it is. But going back to my earlier point, what was that game that we saw in 2018? And is Cyberpunk 2077 as good as it was promised? Is it even better? As I mentioned before, Cyberpunk 2077 in that 2018 trailer made a lot of promises. Promises that were all unfulfilled at launch. But now, with the 2.0 update and the DLC, I would say that it has finally fulfilled many of its promises. But I don't think it has fulfilled all of them. That feeling of changing the world, being someone to Night City and seeing the world adapt to you, sadly, still isn't there. Now, I want to be clear, this doesn't mean that I hate the game or that I don't think the game is good. In fact, I'm going to say it right now, there are things in the current game that are leagues better than what was showed in 2018. I'm sorry, but if I had to look at this screen every single time I wanted to buy cyberware at a Ripper, I think I would jump off my balcony 2 hours into the game. I truly believe that the action video game that we received is better than what was presented to us back then. But that feeling of affecting the world still isn't there. The game has many smoke and mirrors when it comes to player choice. Even in the DLC, main choices still feel like they don't hold heavy weight, and you still end up at the same place, which is kinda sad. Gangs rarely react to any of your choices in the world outside of scripted story beats. For example, if you choose to kill the Maelstrom gang for the drone at the beginning of the game, no one really does anything about it. You can bring it up in certain quests with Maelstrom, but it doesn't lead to anything. It would be sick if gangs sought you out on the street and tried to hunt you down while you were driving around because you killed their leader. Or even when you walk up to gang members, they seem to attack you because you walked into their space, not because you killed their leader. They don't even mention you in random encounters. You're not V, the person who killed Mama Brigitte. You're just that person who's standing on Voodoo Boy turf at the wrong time. It would be so sick if people whispered about you when you walked into the afterlife, and not in a scripted sort of way, but because genuinely you were becoming a legend in Night City. I know a big theme of Cyberpunk 2077 is about the legacy you leave behind, but you hear tons of people talking about Rogue like a legend, and she's still alive. So why can't you? I'm not saying every citizen has to speak of my exploits, but I'd like a few NPCs to have some sort of emotion when they see me, not just the AI turning on to kill. Or even beyond that, we have tons of new weapons and cyberware. It would be cool if somehow people acknowledged your build. The intended belief in that 2018 trailer wasn't just that you could have a ton of builds that you could make, but that you would be acknowledged that you had one. If you wanted to be a netrunner, people would call you as such. Could you imagine if your build was built around your mantis blades and people would yell, "Shit, it's V, watch out for her mantis blades," thus implying that you are known as the Merc with mantis blades? Small stuff like that was what we dreamed about back in the day. But if we're being honest, that's not exactly a small change that can be changed in a patch. And while I'm sad the game never became that, it has me excited for their announced sequel. Because they know they originally made that promise. They know that's something people wanted, and honestly now, they have perfected their gameplay and it's something that they can really put to the test in their sequel. Honestly, while it's really sad and messed up that this game went through so many heinous developmental problems, it helps that they didn't make a complete banger after The Witcher 3, because they can't sit on their laurels anymore. And I feel like they have more motivation than ever to make that game that they promised to make. Because honestly, I bet you they wanted to make that game. But because of the time period and their first time doing something like this, they bit off more than they could chew. But now, there's finally a future for Cyberpunk. And I have no doubt that the sequel will be far better than anything we fans could have possibly imagined.